Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty, where we look at games, movies, or whatever else strikes our fancy, then decide in our opinion whether it's good, bad, or a guilty pleasure. We're your hosts, Theron
and Kit.
Following on our Onimushia 1 and 2 reviews, it felt like a good idea to add in the final of the original trilogy with
Onimushia 3, Demon Siege. Released April 27th, 2004 for North America on the PS2, is the third in the trilogy of the Onimushia games. Because of Oni 2 selling bad in the Western markets, it was worried that it wouldn't sell that great either. So that brought forth the plot of the modern city contrasting with ancient Japan to hopefully bring some people back if done right. A neat little fact for this is in Japan there is a peripheral that is a 38-inch long DualShock controller shaped like a Tachi sword, that not only could play normally, but swinging the controller around would make the character swing his sword as well, making it one of the few mainstream motion sensor controllers of the past. For Oni 3 basically was thrown here turning me on to it, as I only played 1 and 2 but never picked up 3 because if you watched our review for 2, you would know why.
My first experience with Onimusha 3 was a bit of a reluctant one. After Onimusha 2, I wasn't really the most excited to see how the future of the series went, but when my family bought the trilogy together even though we already owned 1 and 2, I figured I might as well try it out. The subsequent response was to be quite happy to see the return of Samanosuke, and also the inclusion of Jean Reno as Jacques. Visually speaking, Onimusha 3 isn't in a horrible place, though admittedly not exactly an amazing looking game. While the overall quality has been increased, there is still a certain visual appeal lost to not having pre-rendered backgrounds. The trade-off is that now levels have a bit more interactable detail, and certain details don't pop out as blatantly as before, for better and for worse.
For me, I think the game's a lot better visually than the second one was. Thankfully, the camera isn't a problem in this one, as it was in 2, where you would have spots where it would focus on 1% of the area when there was a full mob behind you. Though I will say I did get lost in the village and the zoo, but that's more from not remembering where to go next than not seeing a path out, as they kinda made stuff not pop out as much as to know you're supposed to hit it to make things happen. The story of this game starts off nice with the intro of the game where Samanosuke fights past a group of demons on a demon walker ship, in which he makes his way to the main chamber of it and comes across some demon he apparently met in between the first and third game and starts the fight. Cool, this guy looks... and he's dead. Well, that kind of removed any real importance to the intro. Well, the main story is of Samanosuke meeting up with a group of men to raid and kill Nobunaga, as he apparently was killed in 2, but he was just revived by the blood Genma without his super elephant form instead of another plot point that could have worked. After fighting Mori Ramu and pimp slapping him out of the way, Samanosuke starts a fight with Nobunaga and loses, but before he can be killed, a portal opens up, saving him and sending him on to the far future of 2004, where the Genma army has shown up and is attacking the people of Paris. First time someone invaded France where they didn't get a chance to give up first. Here we meet the second character you control, Jacques Blanc, a police officer who basically swaps places with Samanosuke, getting sent 10 days before the temple siege. To get back home, he must help the past Samanosuke set time right, while the future one runs around keeping Jacques' family safe, basically. I enjoy 3's story more than 1 and of course 2's, because there's a lot more going on with it. True, there's some slip-ups with the story, but that's to be expected with a time travel story. But there is some things that the story could have done without. A few times in the past, Jacques and past Samanosuke fight Takehitsu. Screw it, I'm just going to call him E Honda, who just seems to be there for a boss fight. He's not really there to slow you down, but just to fight you, it seems. It always left me going...
Okay.
Also, one thing I was upset by is how the game's concept was, what would a samurai do in the modern world, and a modern cop do in the ancient world, and nothing was done with it. Samanosuke only deals with a cell phone before grasping it in 2 seconds what it is basically to riding along in a car with ease, where I bet earlier would have been him freaking out a little bit. And Jacques doesn't really have anything in his trip back that would be considered strange to him. I really feel like they missed out on some funny or interesting moments that just felt like a missed opportunity.
Story-wise, this game is better than 2 at least. It kind of has a lot of problems, but that's to be expected whenever time travel gets involved in any story. We end up with time travel, interwoven time that is both instant but at other times delayed, mixed with sections in which time just ignores things that happened in one time to instead have different things happen in the different timeline, plus situations of urgency in the future that are urgent because of events happening in the past.
I can't die here.
Come on, Pop!
Henri!
Dad! Dad!
Wait! Henri! What is it?
Akko, what happened to Dad? He's in trouble. It's a trap. What can we do? You'll be okay, Michelle. Hold on to your seats.
If it's something happening in the past, how is it urgent exactly? Not only that, but this time around we have an unexplained psychic child. Jacques' son, for some reason, has a magical psychic link that will, in times of urgency and whenever the plot demands it, just instantly spring into action to solve the issue that is plaguing Jacques in the past, usually before even the Tengu knows about it to bother helping either.
Shit. What do we do? That's it. Damn. No key.
Dad!
What is it, Henri?
It's Dad! Dad! I must get this to Dad!
Wait, Henri, the key to his bike? What's going on?
Akko.
This is it! Take this to Dad right away! How did you know? I don't know, I just did. Here! I'll take it to him. Bye!
To add to it, the demons either got really complacent since the events of getting their asses kicked twice by different people both times, because this time around they not only seem quite confident that Samanosuke and Jacques can't stop them, they seem arrogant to the point of mockery, as well as outright casual indifference to these people following them.
Guildenstern.
You kept me waiting, maggot. Well, this is the interesting thing I told you about. I'm researching time folds.
Time folds?
If my work is successful, it will be possible to freely move across time. Then I can bring Nobunaga along with a swarm of Genma here to destroy all the worthless human vermin, and the Genma will control this world!
Quiet! It will not be so!
Acts like you will burn in hell!
Wait!
You'd make a good detective.
Dude.
Guildenstern built a time folder here. Not quite finished, however.
A time folder? A time machine. Tell me where it is.
Find it yourself. Just watch out for the guard dog.
For people, demons, who have gotten their asses handed to them twice in the past when they had only one person with an Oni gauntlet after them, I would kind of figure they'd be rather concerned when they've not only failed to kill one of them for years, but now a second one has appeared. At that point, you start questioning who in your organization is genuinely incompetent enough that they actually increase the amount of dangerous threats in your way. While pacing is a bit better than the first two games, the theme the game goes for is definitely different, and that is kind of an important change to talk about. I don't exactly hate the change, but I also can't really compare it to Onimusha 1 in that regard. Onimusha 3's story feels less like the daunting samurai vs. evil demons horror story that Onimusha 1 had, and instead feels a bit more like a bit of a cheesy action movie with horror elements. It's not shit in that regard, but whereas Onimusha 2 felt like a cheesy samurai movie, this one feels so far away from the original story themes that it's hard to really compare them. If I were to compare 3 and 2, I would say I prefer 3 because it just felt a bit more entertaining overall, but it's hard to really compare 1 and 3 because they are so vastly different. If I were to give an opinion though, I will say that while Oni 3's story is kind of nice for what it is, I just can't get into the game as I do Oni 1's story. Onimusha 1 just had a more tense atmosphere, while Onimusha 3's action-adventure style is nice, but misses some of the original's charm. Onimusha 3's gameplay takes elements from Onimusha 1 and Onimusha 2 and mixes them together. It kind of does a good job for the most part of this. Onimusha 2's charge mechanic is back, which is nice and enjoyable. You get more varying weapon types than Oni 1. You can now activate Oni mode at your leisure with the press of a button instead of whenever you suck up the final soul you need. This makes it actually useful and not an annoyance due to activating whenever you already cleaned enemies up. Now you can save it until you need it. Something returning from Onimusha 1 was proper Dark Realms, and there are 4 of them. 2 for Jacques and 2 for Samanosuke. Camera angles are in some ways better than Oni 2, but then in other areas are genuinely awful, especially near the end of the game, where they will at points make enemies spawn well out of view and make sure they can start their attacks in your direction before you have a chance to know the enemy is there, let alone attacking. This is now an issue in the Dark Realms as well, as more than once the spawn zones for ranged enemies are in locations that you cannot see while dealing with other enemies, making it pretty easy to lose health to these things. On the other hand, health is kind of made into something there solely for desperate situations. In Onimusha 1 and even in 2, health kind of came from only a few sources, maybe some random drops in 2, but for the most part, you got a limited amount of health pickups. You had to work with them. In Onimusha 3, you get a helpful little Tengu, who not only picks up items for you that drop from the enemies randomly, including health pickups, ensuring that at points I had well beyond 10 health items per character, but she also can get an easy-to-find uniform which gives her the ability to heal your wounds so long as you aren't moving around. It takes a while, but there's no limit to it. Plus, if you spin the right analog stick, it actually speeds up the healing noticeably. The end result is, for every fight except a couple boss fights, the game isn't hard. Neither were Oni 1 or 2, but the difference is that Oni 1 and 2 had a sense of finite equipment. If you run out, you couldn't get more by farming enemies in a location, which you can do in this one. Is it necessary? Not really. Using Tengu's healing frequently, as well as the enemy drops that naturally occur, it's actually not that hard to keep up in health items. Though I would say it depends who you are, the training segments for the game could be considered hard or extremely annoying. The training option this game gives rewards you with health and a couple other goodies if you beat each one. The problem is they're anti-fun. To explain, for training, you have to unlock each one to try, not by simply progressing, but by picking up the training manuals found through the game, some of which are often tossed in places that you see mainly while you're distracted, making it harder to notice. In fact, one major one is hidden in this described situation, and they're unobtainable once you progress too far. This means you must get them at that specific spot, or you can't do the training section for that respective reward. But if that was the worst part, they wouldn't be more than a minor blip. The next problem to point out is that there is a secret ending to this game. To get said secret ending, you need to get all uniforms for the Tengu to wear. The problem is, one of them is held as a reward for completing a specific training, which is located in a location you will be distracted when you run into it, and can even be outright missed if enemies don't either lead you to the area or knock you into the area. But not only is it located in a hard-to-spot location, these training missions are the only thing that could be actually considered hard in the game. But not only are they hard, when I say anti-fun, I mean that. Some of these training segments restrict your gear and such to ensure the outcome they want. You can't use the Tengu's uniforms to give you any sort of edge, and they're going to put you in situations that at certain times will just be frustrating for reasons that are actually inverse to the training in question. Good examples of this is critical training and deflect critical training. Criticals are a thing I've talked about before. You attack at the right time and get to deal massive damage, in most cases killing the opponent outright. It's usually kind of cool to pull off, and in Onimushia 1 it seemed like a challenge to learn timings on it. The thing is, you never needed it to complete the game. It was a cool mechanic tossed in, but wasn't vital. The same can be said for Onimushia 3, admittedly. The problem is that training is now necessary for the special ending, of which some of these are utter nightmares to do. Chain critical is a nightmare of positioning and tedium. With criticals, it was wonky timings that even researching online, people who have practiced it for speedruns sometimes will miss regularly enough to imply there might be a problem with the timing in the game itself. To add to it, they add enemies who oftentimes like to just fucking stand around. But the timing to pull it off is also wonky. Looking online to try and figure out what I was doing wrong specifically for these training attempts, I found out that people don't actually know the exacts. Some say right before the weapon makes contact with your character. Some say press it slightly early because of delay. Some claim your weapon choice changes the timing. Others claim weapon choice doesn't matter. Nobody is clear on this without having someone else contradict them. This is of course the internet, but the truth is, even researching it beyond people arguing, the result was still the same. Sources upon sources, none of which agree with one another, and while I'm sure digging into the game's code would provide the solid answer, it just seems like if it were consistent with how aged the game is at this point, people would have come to a general conclusion instead of still being confused as to how the mechanic ends up working. Why this is such a problem though is, as I said already, the enemies wait. A lot. As well, the further along you get into the training, the enemies do more damage to you, and just get more frustrating to try to critical. But even beyond that though, if you fail the training, which you can easily do because you can't get health back in any way, you have to go all the way back and start over. That one last guy in training who you got to with a sliver of health, who just one-shot you because of it and you had no time to practice his moves to even attempt timing? Yeah! Have fun getting back to him. Thanks to the 6 other enemies on the way to him, you forgot the first enemy's patterns? Yeah, have fun dealing with that crap again. This whole situation might just sound like blaming difficulty, because whenever someone complains about something, everyone always jumps to, "It's just too hard for you," as their defense. But this horrid taste in my mouth is not from a challenging fight that kept kicking my ass, but instead from the constant frustrating waiting. For a training solely about the enemy attacking you and you countering, the enemies are some of the most passive they are in the entire game. It is literally easier to practice the counter out of the training than it is in the training, because the enemies attack more often. I don't know if this is just because you usually run into them in groups, or maybe they tone down the aggression some for training, figuring it'd be inexperienced people attempting them. But when your entire training is centered around attacking the enemy during its attack, you kind of need the enemy to attack. Deflect criticals are a little more forgiving in the regard of damage to yourself, since the entire point is to block. Block early, and if you fail on it, try to delay your block a bit longer, and then longer, and then longer again. It's got pretty much the same exact problems as criticals though, because enemies will take forever to bother attacking at points. Out of 2 real-life days worth of hours spent attempting criticals and deflect criticals, I am 100% certain I spent more time waiting for attacks to attempt criticals or deflect criticals than I actually spent getting hit because I fucked up the timing. To summarize, Have you ever wanted to have to stand still for full minutes at a time, staring at an enemy, waiting for them to attack, unable to take a moment to blink because the last time you did, the enemy attacked, having your eyes start burning because you're so focused on not blinking until the enemy attacks? Do you have fun doing that? If so, then training is for you. If not, then enjoy never getting the special ending to this game. I also mentioned chained criticals, which I'll get to now. They're possibly the genuine worst out of the criticals, primarily because while there is random chance based on what attacks the enemy will use and confusing layouts to how they work and function, as well as forcing you to start all over from the beginning if you don't get it right the first time at points, imagine all of these problems, except now you have variables on where enemy placement is. You see, enemies can be caught in the same criticals you just hit another enemy with, killing multiple enemies at once. This isn't a chain critical. Chain criticals are when you press the attack button at a specific indeterminate time right after you're attacked in order to instantly critical another enemy in line. The thing is, this needs more than simply pressing the button at the right time. If enemies are just an inch too far away, fuck you. It's not happening. Too close? Fuck you. They get hit by the first critical and can't be chain criticaled. On top of the fact that you need to hit the button at the right time, if they're too far away you can't do it, too close, no luck, all while enemies are constantly moving around. So you have random attack choices by enemies, a timing which people can't agree on, mixed with randomly shifting movement of enemies for attacks that need highly specific enemy placement mixed with proper timing after the critical on another enemy in order to succeed. It's a damn good thing completing those training courses only held off a secret enemy and not something more valuable. I want to add, I've harped on the secret ending aspect, not the Tengu uniform hidden behind this. Yet, I'll remedy this now. With how much of a hassle these training scenarios are, you'd figure what's behind the hassle would be something glorious, something powerful. I mean, this is a series that puts you against ever-increasing demonic entities as you travel further down into the Dark Realms in hope of getting a nice weapon, but most likely will simply lose the war of attrition. So, obviously, since the difficulty curve for these trainings are so much so, they not only block a secret ending, but also Tengu uniform necessary for the secret ending, that Tengu uniform is gonna be good, right? Well, would you like to be able to critical strike every enemy instantly? I bet so. Would you like to lose between 30% and 50% of your current health per strike? You see, for all this hassle and such, the reward is a uniform that is useless. As, if you could get all these criticals and succeed already, the uniform is useless to you. But not only that, if for some reason you think that after all that hassle you deserve a nice reward, congrats, now you can lose all your health every time you go into a fight. There is no happy balance with the situation. You have a crap method to get it, and the reward is crap on top of that. For waiting through for hours on end, you get an item that does damage to you anyway. The entire point of getting criticals would be to reduce the damage you take by cutting enemies down before they can deal significant damage, but on top of that, an item that would have been useful for the purpose in question, primarily for people who didn't have experience already, is hidden behind the thing that gives you the experience. It'd be like having to build a Ferrari from scratch by your own hand, just so you can get into a school to learn how to build a Ferrari. Plus, they're going to sap your bank account every time you go for a lesson. I harped on that training section for a while, and the reason is because it is genuinely unfun to the point it made actually enjoyable parts of the game less fun, solely because of the mood-ruining frustration of it. For a game in which attacking things and trying to survive it with skill is one of the more important parts, the training system fails to properly help with this and mainly rewards useless items or items you would have needed had you not already completed the training. Beyond this sort of stuff, another problem the game has is boss design. While I don't usually mention games we have yet to review, the boss combat in many cases felt either like Yakuza was inspired by Oni 3, or Oni 3 was inspired by Yakuza. Some bosses will just be able to dodge your attacks and block your attacks indefinitely, including deflect critical your attacks no matter the timing at points. They're open for specific attacks and only specific attacks, and in some cases it seems to be just random when they're actually open. But then not every boss is like this. Some bosses will have a weak spot that opens at specific times, some are about moving out of the way at proper times, some are just damage sponges, but then like half of them will then be these ones that auto-dodge and auto-block anything you throw at them until the game just decides you did damage to them. In fact, the final boss is essentially like that. His first phase basically auto-blocks everything. The ironic aspect is, the best way to deal with him isn't strategy, it isn't thinking your moves through, it isn't waiting for an attack of opportunity, it's attack mindlessly until the game says you won. That's how the final boss is fought. Just attack. Low on health, use a health item, you'll have plenty by now. This might sound like some nuance to boss design, this idea of instead of just hitting them, you have to think about when to. Except they give no cues as to when they are open, and in some cases, if they aren't far enough into an attack, the animation will outright cancel to give them a chance to move. In some cases, you can even use magic attacks, draining a resource you have to absorb souls to get back, and even when it connects and gets a stun on them, they'll still magically be allowed to get out of it or start suddenly dodging in place, magically avoiding all damage. It's annoying, it's tedious, and it generally reminds me of some bosses from Yakuza, in which at points, some of the only ways to deal damage to them turns out to be constantly refilling your heat gauge and waiting for the option to use it against them. The difference is, whereas Yakuza has a combat system in which heat attacks are basically free damage, in Onimushia 3, these bosses will just decide your attack missed like they suddenly turned 5 and your weapon is imaginary to them.
For this game, I think it's a major improvement from the other two. Why? You can finally control them using the stick instead of the pad. The control over your character feels so much better and allows so much more maneuverability than the other games. Which makes more sense because the first two games were designed with the PS1 in mind, and 3's was starting development after the PS2 was released. There's also even a little platforming, if you can call it that, with Jock using scarabs and his weapon to swing across other platforms. There's not much change combat-wise from the other games other than Oni mode this time can be activated when you wish it to and not collecting the last orb. It helps quite a lot because it can also be used as an instant revive or just a boss crusher as well, just sweeping them out of the way with it. Weapons have also gotten an upgrade as they do in the games. There's a lot more in this game this time. Samanosuke uses his normal sword weapons and an axe this time for his equipment, with a lot more AoE and special attacks, so there's not a major need for aiming. While Jock deals in whip-type weapons, allowing for a more keep-at-a-distance fighting to a point. Though with single magic attacks or just line attacks, it kinda makes him not able to handle large groups as well as Samanosuke can. There is also one other side character you get to play as, for a part, which is Jock's fiancée, Michelle. She gets her own weapons of guns and grenades that you can feel bleed over from another of Capcom's games influencing it. While Michelle doesn't get her own special attacks with her guns, she definitely has a wide selection of them, from a sniper rifle to take out the annoying bird ones, or a rocket launcher to take out basically everything else in one shot, or 2 shots depending on the demon. Also for Samanosuke and Jacques, the soul upgrades have been fixed so it doesn't take as much as 2's, but a bit more than 1, for a more fair and less grinding of a leveling. This time there's a lot more puzzles it feels like, be it the box pipe minigame, swapping numbers to line them up in only a few turns, or pushing blocks to make a target on one to open the box. To outside, where they have you stepping on some panels in an order, sucking up darkness from a statue in the right order, to a button lock puzzle that can go right to hell. This game feels like a lot more in the thinking as well as in the fighting than the other games combined, which I welcome. Mostly. And there to help out with a few of the puzzles is Akko, the most OP fairy, or, well, Tengu, ever! Unlike a certain wood sprite, she actually helps in a lot more ways than just pointing out where to go. She can shift between the future and past to bring items for puzzles, or just health items if one person has too many, and of course, her outfits. Throughout the game you will find a few of these outfits that, when activated, make more orbs drop, health bars appear, more critical chances, and the most OP of them all, unlimited healing, where you just need to stand still for a second and Akko starts healing you. You can even speed it up to heal even faster, making medkits practically useless. The only big pain about her is to get the final ending, you need to get all of her outfits, and one's locked behind the training mode, which was already set on. Final thoughts of this game. I think it's one of the better of the 3 because there's more story and content going on and a lot more variety in the game than how the other 2, especially the second, tried to do. The only real trouble was just that training mode that ruined quite a bit from it. Other than that, I enjoy this game, and like playing through it more than one, and definitely way more than two. It's definitely a look up and play for a good game.
For my frustrations towards the game, I don't think it's bad. Not fully bad, anyway. If not for the abysmal plan they had with how to force the player into the less fun aspects, I'd say the side stuff that's so horrid would simply be an afterthought, and I wouldn't find it so awful. But since semi-important aspects are actually shoved behind these walls of tedium, boredom, and frustration, it's hard to say it's as enjoyable as I think it could be. It just doesn't have the charm or quite the same draw of the original, and while it isn't a bad game, I don't think it's good either. I'd say this game is a guilty pleasure at best.